Monday. Thank you for joining me for the fifth of six series of LinkedIn Live as we talk about ripple leadership. So, today, what we're going to talk about is actually practice. How do we make sure we practice the behaviors that we want to have in order to demonstrate the change and have the change that we want to make in our leadership journey? So I'm going to walk through a recap a little bit of where we've come from, and then we're actually going to go into the concept of practice makes progress because we want to progress to the leader that we want to be, the leader that we have designed. So for a quick recap, we started out with our introduction on our leadership values. Who is the leader that we want to be? What are our values, our core leadership values that we have? We define those. And then we looked at how we define success. So how do you define success as a leader? Success to you. Remember, it can be different from anyone else, but defining your success. And then we covered the importance of reflection and doing that through a strong journaling practice and gaining insight from other sources, getting that additional outside perspective in order to understand maybe how others see us. We can get those through performance reviews, assessments, and various kind of forms of feedback. And then last week, what we discussed is how do I take all this information that I've gotten and how do I analyze it? How do I dissect it? How do I dig deep into what it says to put a thoughtful action plan together to get me where I want to be as a leader, to help me design that journey and take that path that I want to take as a leader. So what I want you to think about is this. You have, probably uncovered things that you need to keep doing. Keep doing those things. The success that you have had so far, the things that you are doing is what's gotten you there. Keep doing those things. You want to continue to focus on them. But there are probably some things that you want to do differently. And change is hard. Where I want to talk about today and where I want to take us is where our brains come into play. Our brains make it even harder for us to change. And it's because our brains have rules. They have rules, very strict rules of connection and neurons connecting. And we have to work with these rules. And being able to work with these rules is what's going to help us make the changes that we need to make. Think about it this way. When we learn with practice, we learn by doing things over and over and over. Think about sports, a musical instrument. Maybe it is exercise. Anything you do on a daily basis, all of our daily tasks, you have learned through practicing them over and over. How you became the subject matter expert that you are in your current role. You learned that by doing it over and over and over again. And this cognitive process is from the theory of Hedian learning, which is summarized in what some of you may have heard as neurons that fire together, wire together. And so today what I want to do is I want to take you down 3 areas to focus on in order to make sure that you're working with your brain and that the behaviors and habits that you would like to build are the ones that are getting your attention in order for you to design that leadership journey that you're looking to design. And so as I go through this, I have 3 areas that I really want to walk you through. And the first one is actually to work with your brain. Because often we try to break a bad habit by focusing on it. And when we focus on it, we're allowing our brains to pay attention to it. We're allowing our brains to think about and deeply make the connection with that behavior or habit that we're wanting to get rid of. And so instead, what I want you to think about doing is how can you reframe your thought process to focus on the behaviors or habits that you want to start doing. So by focusing on what you're wanting to grow, that new habit, then you're able to kind of work with that connection that ultimately will become that hardwiring. And that hardwiring is what develops the habits. So habits tend to operate on an unconscious level. They're an automatic level. And often we're unaware of the habits that we're even acquiring, but we're equally unaware that we're using them. And so by building the leadership habits at the automatic level, they will be easier for us to use. So think about that as you are thinking about the behaviors that you want to have. The next thing I want you to consider are maybe some of your current habits and behaviors that could potentially be getting in the way of your the new habits that you want to develop. That doesn't mean that they're bad habits. They just could be competing habits or competing commitments. And there is an entire book from Keegan and Leahy, it's called The Immunity to Change. And they refer to these as competing commitments or competing priorities. And so we want to explore our systems and our processes and our thinking to make sure that we don't have current behaviors that are getting in the way of reframing our desired new behaviors. And I always think about this one as my immunity to change is my workout habit. So one of the things that I have this belief that I need to get up and work out in the morning. That's when I have to work out. It doesn't work for me later in the day. The other thing is I really stay up too late. And so then I like to sleep late. I have a hard time getting up. And so in order to make the change and for me to have the ability and the time to work out in the morning, it needs to start with going to bed earlier so I can get up earlier so I'll have time to work out. So it's just looking at those behaviors that could be getting in the way of the new behavior. And you may have to change more than one thing. So along these same lines, we have to be able to exercise what is called veto power. So every time we exercise veto power, what we're doing is we're choosing to do something other than the habit we are attempting to break. So that's going to be how we reinforce these alternate actions and we make them stronger. So remember, the brain's making those connections and based on the use of it. And so if we can veto those bad behaviors and use those new behaviors, then we'll be repeating the behavior often enough for it to become an automatic habit. And through those strong connections, it becomes the behavior that we repeat, maybe even unconsciously. This one could be something as simple as every time I reach for my phone and I go to push that Facebook link and scroll through Facebook, I pause and I veto that by looking at what I'm doing and thinking, is there something more productive I should be doing rather than Facebook? So you vetoed that action by thinking about what productive behavior do I need to be practicing at this moment. So through both of these practices, we're intentionally changing our brains through growth and actually reorganization because we're prioritizing the things that we want to prioritize. And we think about learning as it's the brain's learning is the neuroplasticity. The brain is actually very plastic and has the ability to learn and grow. We've all seen that as we have developed over time. But what they refer to these practices are is actually self-directed neuroplasticity. Because what we're doing is we are being very intentional and changing the way that our brain works to be the brain that helps us be the leader we want to be in this particular instance. Again, we all know change is hard and we can't do it alone. So I encourage you to find an accountability partner. When you have figured out the things that you want to change, get somebody to help you. These other practices are things that you can do, but you can get feedback from family, friends, colleagues, someone to coach you. It doesn't have to be a formal coach, but someone that can coach you and help you, someone that can provide the feedback that you need and help make sure that you're paying the attention and the repetition you need in order to make those habits hardwired. So I think about this, and based on this research, I work with my coaching clients in this exact same way. This focused attention is what increases the likelihood of embedding the new ideas or creating the long-term change. And so I help them choose where they want to focus their attention. And by focusing that attention on the things that they want to do differently, it's creating that new wiring. Now, this second step of this equation is the repetition, because you pay attention to it, but then you also have to repeat it over and over and over again. And so this step of repetition is necessary in order to form the desired hardwiring. And we've learned through brain research that with enough attention and repetition, thoughts and behaviors can become an intrinsic part of a person. In other words, they become habits. And I encourage you to practice. That practice is what's going to help you get through the change and have the behaviors and habits that you're looking for. So in closing, I want you to think about this in one more way, because I'm sure many of you have heard use it or lose it. Sure. And a lot of times we think about that in things that we want to continue being able to do. Ride a bicycle, keep riding it, or you lose it, whatever it is. Practicing a sport, a skill, driving, anything, cooking, baking, use it or lose it. And that's all true. But when you're trying to replace a bad habit, the brain will help you. By not using that bad habit, you'll eventually lose it. And so sometimes I want you to think about what you do want to lose and put your leadership behaviors in two buckets: a use it bucket and a lose it bucket, and leave them there. And always know that the ones you want to use, you will continue to pay attention and repeat. And those that are in the lose it bucket, close the lid on that bucket and put them away. And it will eventually get much easier to not have those habits and behaviors that you've tried to get rid of. So I want to thank you. Those of you who've joined us on the LinkedIn Live today, thank you. Those that are watching the replay, thank you. I look forward to seeing your comments and engaging with you all right here on social media. I look forward to the 6th and final episode in this series, which will be next week. And we're going to talk about leading and evolving our ripple leadership. Thanks a lot and have a fantastic week.